to the extent that I understand what's going on, it's a pretty tectonic shift in terms of markets and commodities trading between the West and Russia. I think this is a big deal. I think that has a lot to do with the petrodollar, but I don't want to get into that. I think it has a lot to do with reserves in terms of gold. Russia essentially at this point doesn't own any U.S. assets in terms of U.S. Treasury bonds and things like that. They've been selling those over the last 10, 15 years, buying gold. And now they're just like, all right, we're going to do our own thing now. And I think this is a large shift that's creating a divide that's going kind of away from globalism towards nationalism. And I think this is really the beginning of that shift. So.
Welcome to In It to Win It. This is Steve Barton, and today we are back with Justin Huhn from Uranium Insider. Justin, thanks for coming back on the show.
It's my pleasure. Yeah, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, I figured I would go on site again and have the uranium power plant right behind me.
Convenient to have that location just right in your backyard there.
It is, yeah. Works perfect for the show. Okay, let me start off by saying we are not financial advisors. Do not take this as financial advice. Do your own due diligence and do your own research. This is simply what we're doing. Okay, uranium spot price it was up a little bit above $60, right? Just a few days ago, and now it's starting to drop down. It looks like it's around 55. Is that, what are your thoughts on that? Why did it come down when it seems like the fundamentals, the big picture view would be that it should be rising?
Yeah, that's kind of the classic question for this uranium market is the fundamentals look so great. Why is anything going down? It looks like the spot price is just making another higher high, higher low. And essentially what happens is Spot has become such a prominent buyer in the spot market that they are far and away the largest buyer of physical uranium in the spot market now. And so when they come in and they're buying substantial volumes and they're acting as a very consistent bid in the spot market, anytime they step out due to the financial flows pulling back, which is going to continue to happen, it'll ebb and flow throughout this bull market. It's not going to be 100% pedal to the metal from now until we peak. We're going to go with these ups and downs. So anytime the funds flow pauses in terms of going into the spot vehicle and their purchasing slows down, then you'll see traders take advantage of that calm moment in the market and work that price back down. So this is just going to continue to repeat. We'll probably just keep making higher highs and higher lows for as long as this is a bull market. And so absolutely nothing really to worry about.
Okay. It's a buying opportunity.
Yeah, in my opinion. I mean, the fundamentals just continue. I mean, they haven't really weakened. The market's a bit jumpy just because of everything that's going on in the world, and that's not unique to uranium. But yeah, I mean, it's anytime the fundamentals continue to grow and either the equities don't respond in kind to the news flow, or what's happening recently over this past week or so is we had news about the potential for the U.S. to sanction Rosatom, and you could tell a lot of hot money came into the market expecting that news to solidify or be confirmed over the course of a day or two or three. And when the news didn't come over the weekend, money just started to leave the market. And so we always have that, even though the majority, in my opinion, of investors in the uranium space are here for the mid to long term and understand the fundamentals for the most part. In any space, you're always going to have a certain percentage of retail traders that are always chasing the shiny object and will come in and pile in on some expected news catalyst. And if it doesn't play out on whatever time frame they feel is justified, then they bail. So that's exactly what happened last week into this week. But we did have some news come in yesterday evening through this entity called the National Law Review, where they broke down an executive order that looks like it's coming into place from the Biden administration that appears to be banning any new purchasing of any Russian energy related products, including all elements of uranium products. And so that's, official confirmation of that is not 100% clear, but it's looking like it's increasingly likely that Russian uranium exports will be somehow impacted, at the very least to the US, if not also to the EU. But of course, what we're already seeing without these official government sanctions is we're seeing a lot of self-sanctioning going on in the sector. We're seeing utilities choose to not purchase from Russia, choose to bail out of their particular purchasing contracts and seek materials elsewhere. So that's already starting to happen.
Now, you mentioned before that each of the nuclear power plants, they have about 2 years worth of supply of uranium on them, right? So if we stop importing uranium from Russia, it's not like this is going to affect that tomorrow. It'll take time for them to eat
Correct.
through that, and they're going to have to secure a supply somewhere else.
Yes, and that's obviously, on average. Now, the EU is a bit more stable. They generally require that nuclear utilities within the EU have 3+ years of inventory on hand to stabilize the grid for events such as this. The US is a little bit less covered. They have on average around 2 years of inventory. And of course, that inventory is what's considered U3O8 equivalent. So the inventory can be throughout the fuel cycle. So if some of that inventory exists in U3O8, they still have to move that material through the fuel cycle, which can take 12 to 18 months. But yes, generally speaking, most nuclear utilities have a bit of a buffer for situations like this. But because of the length of the fuel cycle, even 2 years out, 3 years out, essentially is kind of tomorrow for a nuclear utility.
Okay. Yeah, I was just, I don't I'm not on Twitter a whole heck of a lot, but I was looking through what Elon Musk had recently said, and he was talking about inflation and how the way you kind of have to read a little bit in between the lines of that guy. I
Right.
think he's on a whole nother stratosphere, kind of like Michael, shit, what's the big short guy?
Schellenberger.
Yeah. And he's like, you might want to start investing in commodities, real things, real assets in companies that you actually believe in. It's like a little
Yeah,
foreshadow. I think he's trying to give his followers.
for sure. Yeah, he's definitely upped his trolling game over the past couple of months, but he has been a pretty vocal advocate of nuclear. So that's been good to see.
He
Yeah.
has, yeah,
And
yeah, and
Michael
he was
Schellenberger, I don't know if you saw, he's running for governor in California. I know you're a fellow California resident. I was really pleased to see that.
nice, nice. Um, he okay. What is your what is the spot up to now as far as physical holdings and where are we around NAV on that?
It's trading at a decent discount to NAV, although the spot price did move down a bit today, and the trust itself is rebounding, technically speaking. So it's probably somewhere around a 5% discount to NAV. Yesterday, it did reach close to a 9 or 10% discount to NAV, which is historically the highest discount to NAV that it's been. I think we hit 10% discount back in December on a single day. Generally speaking, when it does go to a discount to NAV, it will tend to go to a more extreme distance from NAV on the downside when it does, because when it's trading at a premium to NAV, they're issuing shares, which creates some selling pressure. But they have been at a premium to NAV for the most of this month, for the most of last month, but they are at a slight discount to NAV currently. They're sitting on almost 51 million pounds of uranium. They purchased almost 11 million pounds this year so far. They've raised over $500 million this year so far. It's an unbelievable development in the uranium thesis for sure.
Any plans of stopping at 100 million pounds, or like, is this we're just going to see how far the train goes, or
I don't think, honestly, they've structured the trust in such a way that it doesn't really appear that they have plans, and there's a lot of questions around this that come at me almost on a daily basis. Like, Justin, what's going to happen when they sell this pounds back in the market? It's like, yeah, they're not going to do that.
yeah?
They don't exist to trade uranium. They've had requests from utilities to borrow uranium. And while it's technically written into their prospectus that they are legally allowed to do so, John Ciampaglia is like, yeah, we're not doing that. Our shareholders will not like us to trade uranium and put that type of buffer into the market. They exist literally to hold the physical commodity. And that's how they give their investors exposure to that physical commodity, which is very difficult to do for uranium. You can't just have a closet full of uranium bullion in your safe. In order to have exposure to the commodity, this is the best way to do it. And there's Geiger Counter in London, and there's Yellow Cake, or excuse me, Geiger Counter is an ETF, Yellow Cake in London, another physical holding, and they're at a substantial discount to NAV. They're pushing 15 to 20% discount to NAV
Oh,
right
really?
now, but
I don't
Spud is
have any
kind of
yellow cake.
stealing the show.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, so
What's their ticker?
YCA.
CA.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's
Okay.
a nice arbitrage opportunity with that one, but they definitely don't seem to be getting the attention that Sput does. Interestingly enough, Sprott is doing very well with this vehicle as it is just holding the uranium. They're probably going to pull somewhere to the tune of 20 million in fees this year, not just the 0.35% management fee, but they take a 1% fee every time they buy uranium. So
Oh,
they're going to be somewhere around that 20 million a year at this NAV. So and as the thing continues to grow, it's going to continue to print money. And of course, they themselves and their clients are also positioned in the ETFs and in the large cap uranium miners. So as goes Spot, so goes the sector, and they understand this completely. So it's been a brilliant vehicle that they've created here.
yeah, yeah. I'm gonna share my screen here real quick, and so if you guys are listening on the podcast, just click on the link in the show notes. It'll take you over to YouTube, and you can see what we're looking at here. Okay, so URA. Let me get. This will be maybe the daily is the best one to look at here. We kind of got a really nice the 200 average right around here. I think anything generally speaking around this would be a decent buy point. Do you agree or?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, for sure. It's holding up quite well, all things considered.
I mean, if you really wanted to put a stink bid in here, maybe down here around $21 or something, but I don't know that it'll reach that. Maybe it will, but
Yeah,
I don't
now
know.
that we have the spot price moving, assuming that we find a higher low and have at least it stabilized there. Of course, broad market influences clearly have their influence, especially when spot market is flat, as we saw December, January. And I think generally speaking, that's definitely putting a weight on this trade, having just a weaker broad market and having a bit of risk off general sentiment across most markets with a current war going on. Investors are a little bit gun shy and jumpy, especially with this trade. So this morning, actually, there was an earthquake in Japan. I don't know if you saw that. It was a 7.3 off the coast of the Fukushima prefecture.
Oh,
So
perfect.
we saw stocks sell off this morning. Everything's fine as far as we can tell, but the market's just jumpy.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah,
Okay.
never a
I
dull
did not see
moment for a
that.
uranium investor.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Okay, here's oh, this is the one that I sent the picture to you either yesterday or the day before, I can't remember, but I was pretty stoked because I
Hmm.
got in here on URNM at $73. Just still right around that 200 moving average. I don't know. I got another stink bid order in here down here around $68, thinking
Mm.
maybe it'll touch this, but um
Yeah, it very well could. It's short-term expectations in this market are just incredibly difficult. So we tend to just try to zoom out. It's possible that gets hit, but I don't really know. I always say I wouldn't want to be without a seat at the table, but now you obviously already have a seat at the table. So if that stink bid doesn't get hit, you're not really all that upset about it, probably.
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. UROY, the Uranium Royalty Corporation, kind of the same setup here, right? There's the 200 day moving average. These are all, they're kind of like the gold stocks in a way. I think it's a really small market and they all just kind of follow each other, correct?
For the most part, yeah, yeah, that's true. I mean, there's definitely, if you zoom out far enough, you can see pretty significant differences in the performances of a number of these vehicles,
Yeah.
especially for the companies that had to go through pretty extensive dilution through the bear market and have been around for a while. And Uranium Royalty IPO'd at a pretty darn good time. Just what was that, 6 months, three to 6 months before the March crash,
Yeah.
2020. So clearly has been an outperformer in that time frame.
Yeah. 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 I wish I would have known about this a couple of years ago. That would have been nice. Here's
Indeed.
the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust. I think the last time we were on, it was up around 14 or $15. Now we're floating around 13 or so. But yeah,
Yeah,
very exciting. Very exciting.
Yes, it's interesting how spot hit that resistance of the previous high in September, even with a higher spot price. That previous high in September, they were at, gosh, at least a 15% premium to NAV at that point, which they have not done since then. But Cameco also retested that high with it just
Okay,
got rejected right at that same kind of
around
retest
September there.
of November,
Oh,
the
November.
November high. Yeah, different time frame, but the
Okay.
high of the intracycle high of the autumn of last year. Both of those stocks kind of touched that previous high and then sold back down.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It one thing I'm really excited about is this Uranium Bootcamp coming up. So we got Rick Rule. He's going to be emceeing the event. We've got the president of Cameco, the stock we just showed. We got Amir Adnani, CEO of Uranium Energy Corp, Next Gen Energy, Uranium Royalty, CEO of Sprott Asset Management, John, how do you pronounce his last name? Chimpaglia?
Chimpaglia.
Chimpaglia.
Chimpaglia. Yeah.
Lobo Tigre, you're going to be on a, what'd you call it? A
They're
pundit
calling it a
panel?
pundit panel with myself, Rick Rule, and Lobo Tigre.
Nice,
Yeah,
nice.
I'm actually really excited about this event, and I'm probably most excited to hear from not only the rep from Kazatomprom. I forget who's speaking. It might be Askar,
Ascar,
who,
yeah.
who I really like. Yeah, Askar Badarbayev. I really like that guy. He's very humble, very seemingly honest, and he's in a really tricky, precarious position right now. With everything that's going on, so it'd be very interesting to hear him speak. And then the guys, I'm forgetting their names, but they represent WMC Energy, which is the uranium trading company that essentially works for Sprott. So they're the guys when Sput is out there buying, they're the guys that are on the horn going out into the market and finding the stuff. And
Ah,
so they have insights into this market like nobody else. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing them talk.
yeah. I'm just tickled pink, and I am so glad I found this sector. And I mentioned it the last week is can't imagine Rick putting on a class such as this. I talked to Callie a few days ago. She said they're up to 2,000 participants, and they said they usually get 80% of their um, uh, people coming into it just a few days before.
The
So,
last
like,
few days, yeah.
yeah, today until Saturday, right? And having that kind of a class in such a small market, I gotta believe we're around a bottom around this time before this class comes in. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the space is a lot bigger than I'm thinking, and there's not as much capital going to move into the sector just because of this class. But I don't know. I would hate to not have some kind of bet in before this takes place because I could picture another jump. Maybe I'm off. I don't know.
Yeah, it could align well with a number of other possible catalysts. On the 23rd of March is the next the postponed meeting for Sprott in terms of having the takeover for URNM, and hopefully they've got that 50% quorum at this point, because they weren't even close in February, and URNM is probably 75-80% retail held, and so it's very difficult to get 50% of the shareholders. On the date of record, which was December 15th. So if anybody is listening and watching this, was a shareholder on December 15th of last year, you can vote to have Sprott take over URNM. The yes vote is certainly there. They've got over 90% yes votes on this. So it'll happen. It's just a matter of time when it'll happen. Hopefully it happens in March. The other thing is I honestly think there's still I don't think the market is discounting the likelihood of Russia being cut off from uranium supply in some way or another. And that will have effects on this market, and it already is. But I think that this is going to stick. I think it's going to last a while. What's going on geopolitically between the West and Russia right now is, in my opinion, I'm not an expert in geopolitics, but to the extent that I understand what's going on, it's a pretty tectonic shift in terms of markets and commodities trading between the West and Russia. I think this is a big deal. I think that has a lot to do with the petrodollar, but I don't want to get into that. I think it has a lot to do with reserves in terms of gold. Russia essentially at this point doesn't own any U.S. assets in terms of U.S. Treasury bonds and things like that. They've been selling those over the last 10, 15 years, buying gold, and now they're just like, all right, we're going to do our own thing now. And I think this is a large shift that's creating a divide that's going kind of away from globalism towards nationalism. And I think this is really the beginning of that shift. So I'm extremely excited about this market. And I think, as the news continues to trickle out and we see the confirmation and the actions of the prices of all the elements of the fuel cycle continue to confirm this dynamic that's being created here, I think that we'll have a resumption of the bull market. Yeah.
Yeah, what Elon was saying about Europe and specifically Germany, he's like, they better start refiring up their nuclear plants, or they're going to be in a world of hurt, if they're really going to stop purchasing energy from Russia.
Yeah, yeah. Russia has so
Big
much
shakeout.
leverage. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they're highly reliant on Russian natural gas, or natural gas in general, that does primarily come from Russia at this point, with Nord Stream 2 being at least temporarily postponed or unapproved, let's say. It's possible they're going to be getting natural gas imports continuing from the US, but clearly that's not a great long-term solution when they have idled plants. The 3 plants they just shut down 3 months ago that they could bring back online very easily. Whether or not they'll do that, who knows? But they've put so much money into establishing renewables across their grid, and I think they're more than 50% renewable power between wind and solar and geothermal. But because of that, because those are intermittent sources of energy that cannot be stored on a grid scale, and they've closed down nuclear, they've had to go crazy with natural gas, biomass, and coal. And it's a very, that has the worst air quality in Europe. And
Yeah,
this is why, and it's far more dangerous than nuclear.
yeah. You mentioned that Askar, how do you pronounce his last name?
Badarbayev.
Badarbayev of Kazatomprom. You said he's kind of in an interesting time right now, where he has to tiptoe a little bit. What do you mean by that?
Well, Kazakhstan has had a number of sort of exogenous events, let's say, happen over the past few months. One was the unrest in the first week of January that we saw. There was civil unrest. The mainstream narrative that it was around practically a doubling of liquid gas prices, essentially overnight. They had price caps on this, and then the people started rioting, and then when they took the price caps off, and the cost of that energy doubled. That was kind of the mainstream narrative. There's a messy geopolitical backstory that I don't fully understand, so I'm not even going to get into it. But that was looking like it was increasingly getting worse over the few days. A number of oligarchs left the country. The rioters had taken over the main airport. And so it was looking messy. And then, of course, the president of Kazakhstan, rung up Putin and said, "Hey, buddy, how about you throw us a bone here?" And the Belarusian and Russian troops rolled in over the ensuing few days and quelled the unrest. Like, it was just gone like that. So they took care of business really quickly. But it caused a bit of a disruption in the markets in terms of the uranium market. Following that, there was a short period of quiet until the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and now Kazakhstan is sort of stuck in the middle in terms of I would say that their largest risk here would be secondary sanctions. And so any associations with Russian banks, with Russian joint ventures, has the potential to disrupt these companies. So for Kazatomprom in particular, 20% of Kazatomprom's production on an attributable basis, not on a 100% basis. So for Kazatomprom as a company, 20% of their production is within a joint venture with Uranium One, which is under the umbrella of Rosatom in Russia.
Yeah.
And so that's one element of it. How that will affect them going forward, we don't know. Will certain companies in the West not be buying as much from Kazatomprom because their association with Uranium One? We don't know. Will they actually have secondary sanctions come to them because of having to deal with Russian banks with that joint venture? We don't know. Then there's issues of shipping. Their primary exporting point is the port of St. Petersburg in Russia. So they will ship to the port of St. Petersburg and then ship out to the world from there. And while he states that the material is owned by Kazatomprom all throughout that shipping cycle, Even though it goes through Russia, it never becomes Russian uranium because it's leaving through that port. And that's an interesting point. But at the same time, we're seeing Maersk, which is the largest global container shipping company that does ship Kazakhstan's uranium globally from the port of St. Petersburg, say that they are not going to be shipping to or from Russia. And I haven't heard further developments on this. My understanding is that they were going to honor contracts for the next 6 months. That was a few weeks ago. And at which point new contracts starting at that point would not be honored to or from that port. He did attempt to try to calm the markets with that concern by stating that they have been working on for a number of years an alternative route going through the Caspian Sea, Black Sea towards the west. It wasn't all that reassuring, but they also can do what's called a swap trade. The Chinese hold inventory of various places around the globe, and technically, if it were allowed, Western utilities could purchase from Kazatomprom, and if they couldn't ship through that alternative route or through St. Petersburg, they can ship it east to China, and then China can do a swap at one of the conversion facilities in the West, where that buyer could receive that material. It's kind of complex, but all of that is to say that they're just kind of caught in a tricky position with everything that's going on here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, he'll probably talk about it on Saturday.
I think so, yeah. And he did an interview last week with James Conner from Bloor Street Capital that I highly recommend watching. And he he did as best as he could. English is not his first language, so you have to play that into the way that he responds to the questions as well, which I think makes up for at least some of the lack of reassurance in what he's saying is that language barrier a little bit. But he's doing the best he can, and I think that they are going to continue to be the low cost producer. Of course, it's the obvious value play across the entire sector.
Yeah.
But there's some hair on it. There's some risk with this jurisdiction now that wasn't there 3 months ago.
Yeah, I just bought a little bit more this morning. It was down around $29. It looked like it was bound. Maybe I'm off, but
Yep.
that's that's what I learned from my Russian bets. I was bet on the best oil company in the world, Gazprom, and the best gold miner, the Polymetal, and that went to shareholder heaven. But
Yeah, risky
like
stuff.
it's
Yeah.
causing me to be just a little bit cautious here. Like okay, well, like I got Vale down in Brazil. I don't know. They're one of the BRICS countries that's trying to get off the U.S. dollar. Are there sanctions coming there in the future? I don't know. Yeah, it's very very interesting times, and I think we're either going to you're going to have to really be an active investor. This whole set it and forget it thing. Oh, I just got the S&P
Yeah.
500. I think those days are over for the next while.
I completely agree with you across pretty much all classes, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Cool. Well, thank you, Justin. You
Sure.
guys can join us at the Uranium Bootcamp. There's a link in the show notes if you want to sign up for the class. We'll also put Justin's YouTube channel, Uranium Market Minute, and go to uraniuminsider.com for more things uranium with Justin. Justin, you have yourself a great rest of the day, and thank you again, sir.
You as well, Steve. Thanks for having me. Good to talk with you.
Bye bye.
Bye.